we'll start the meeting.
We're good to go.
All right, thank you. So, Council, I'd like to call this regular Council meeting of March 9th, 2021 to order. I'm going to ask for adoption of the agenda. Does someone want to make that motion, please? Councillor Brooks Hill, second by Councillor Charlotte. All in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 23rd. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Charlotte, Councillor Palmer, all in favor? Motion's carried. Business arising from the minutes. So most of you or all of you will have seen that I've asked for a long-term financial plan update dealing with the 1% tax so that we as council would know the implications. Are there any questions regarding that report? Councillor Brooks Hill.
I have a number of, I don't know about questions so much as comments. I'm a little unsure where to begin with it, but I notice in there, and unfortunately my laptop's frozen right now, so I can't actually open the report to quote from it, but I believe it was, there's two motions that are referenced in there from the January 21st meeting of 2020.
Yep.
And so I believe, thank you, Cindy, for pulling that up for me. So there was a motion for an annual increase to the contribution of 2% per year from 2021 to 2025. And then I think it's lower down. Oh, there it is. That the road rehabilitation and road maintenance capital budget be maintained at 1.25 million annually, plus increasing it with in accordance with the inflation from the City of Edmonton Municipal Cost Index. So I kind of find those two motions a little bit contradictory. So I guess my one question would be, so currently we're contributing, I think it's with that 1% increase this year, it's 1.17 million annually. If that's, I believe that's.
Ms. McCabe, any comment?
Through your worship, I'm just going to pull up the amount.
Because if we increase it 2% of taxation each year, that's roughly 1.25 million. So that's about $250,000 a year. So by 2025, it would be well over $2 million. But then there's the contradictory motion that's saying, well, 1.25 plus the cost of inflation, which would be, you know, somewhere around 50,000 a year.
Through your worship, the one motion is to do with the actual transfer into the Transportation Infrastructure Reserve Fund, which is used to fund anything to do with transportation. So that might be roads, sidewalks, sometimes curb and gutter, trails, etc. Pedestrian bridges would be funded out of that if we needed to do work on that bridge. The other one is the actual budget for doing road rehabilitation and maintenance. And so that budget was originally set at 1.25 million, and it's being increased by 2% per year in the budget. In 2021, the projected transfer to the Transportation Infrastructure Reserve Fund is just over 1.3 million at this point. So there are two different amounts. One is the actual transfer into the reserve fund, and then one is the budget for maintaining the roads. The budget for maintaining the roads is paid for out of the reserve, but they're actually two different amounts.
Okay, Councillor Brooksville.
Okay, so I understand that, although, you know, it would be helpful to sort of, you know, see that in some kind of graph or chart or something, Because then, so I'm guessing then, so currently how much are we actually putting into that roads
Reserve?
and maintenance? Well, not the reserve, but how much is the 1.17 million that's
Yes.
referenced in the report? That's how much is currently going into the roads and maintenance?
Through your worship, that's correct. So that's the average amount over the next 5 years. So it does fluctuate a little bit over each of the years because obviously it's climbing as the years go on, but the average over the 5 years is the 1.17 million.
And that's including, so, you know, if that's, we do 1% this year, and then for, it would be the next 4 years, we increased it by, into the transportation infrastructure reserve, if we increase that by 2% each year, we're still only averaging 1.17 million over that time, or?
No, the transfers into the reserve fund for 2021, the budget is 1.3 million going into the reserve fund. And then we're also budgeting on average over the next 5 years to take out 1.17 million out of the reserve fund to pay for the roads. So the amount going, so the amount being spent on pavement management, fixing the roads in the budget is 1.17 million per year for the next 5 years. That's obviously the average. And then we're putting money into the reserve that funds that rehabilitation, as well as funding other things as well.
Other projects as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And so that average you're getting, is that just assuming that we maintain the status quo of our 1.3 million right now?
The 1.17 million average, you mean, sorry, Your Worship? Your Worship?
Councillor Brooks Hill, is that what you're looking for? Or is the average that we're putting in?
Well, I'm just, if in the long-term financial plan we're including that projected 2% increase each year over the next 4 years, are we still only averaging 1.17 million?
Yes, and that's because that's what's needed to keep the reserve fund from going negative. So there was a reduction made to the money being put towards road rehabilitation in the next 5 years so that the reserve fund that we're putting the money into actually has enough funds to pay for everything.
So so by reducing this year, the 1% of taxation is roughly $125,000 ish, give or take.
Yep, correct.
So that over 5 years is going to lower our ability.
Yeah. Sorry, through your worship, we lose that 125 this year in 2021. We also now don't have it in the base for 2022 and in perpetuity. So it's actually lost infinite, like it's lost forever. So the base didn't go up. And of course, every year, the amount that we put in is based on the prior year's contributions. And so we reduced it in 2021. It's only 1% increase now instead of 2%. And so that reduction, now the base for the start at 2022 is now lower by that $125,000. And so it's lost every year into the future for the financial plan, unless we increase the contributions in a future year to compensate for that.
Okay. And so presumably in future years, there's other things that are already budgeted for outside of roads and rehabilitation that's going to eat up that extra money we're putting in.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So this year, a majority of the money we're putting into transportation and infrastructure reserve is going to roads and maintenance, but in the next 5 years, there's other projects that are going to eat up that.
Yes.
Yeah, that utilize that fund. Yep.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Is there anything further?
No, that does actually answer my question. Yeah.
All right,
I
great.
guess I was confused with the transportation infrastructure vis-a-vis the roads and maintenance and exactly what was coming in and coming out.
Good. Any other questions on this report that's been added? Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we're going to move on to announcements from the mayor. And so I just want to talk just a little bit about vaccine rollout. I just got off a phone call with with the other resort municipalities and Dr. Bonnie Henry. So the vaccines are rolling out, new vaccines coming into our province. So those who are 90 and over can start to get their vaccines this week, 85 and over next week, and 80 the week over. And so the one thing that I wanted to mention, especially to the public, so if you have one person in your household who is 80 years old and the other person is 85 and you want to wait till you're both able to go at the same time, you wait till the timeline for the 80-year-old and then both can go and get the vaccine. And as we see more vaccines roll out, we may see some more special groups get their vaccine in addition to the age categories. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to roll out, and the health department doesn't know. And part of that is securing the vaccines for the country and for the province. But it's a beautiful thing to start to see vaccines roll out as we start to move towards summer. So there'll be announcements coming from the government as we move forward, and they'll make it clear how things are going to work. And we're all concerned as we move towards our spring break to make sure that we all get safe. And anyway, quite appreciative of what Dr. Henry's doing for the province. So we're going on to delegations and presentations, and I believe we have Curator Cathy English here from the Revelstoke Museum to give us a presentation. Cathy, are you on?
Yes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. As we know, it's been a challenging year for everyone. Our activities and our numbers and our income were definitely changed and challenged by this world event, as they were for everyone. The museum was closed entirely from March 16th, 2020. I'm getting, as we're coming up to that anniversary, I'm getting flashbacks of that, and everybody moved quickly as the orders came through. But we were closed until June 1st, 2020. We were able to open safely at that time. I spent quite a bit of time working from home, working on the COVID-19 safety plan, and it was unusual, work that I'd never done before, but there were some really good templates out there to follow. So we were able to get that in place and open safely. Things were a little bit different. Our attendance was down as we expected, but we still had over 8,453 visitors in the past year, down from 12,000 the previous year. Numbers were good in July and August. We really saw families traveling in BC. And what we were finding was that they were spending money. I think there was that shopping local, shopping where you were, because people weren't going on big vacations as they normally would have. So they were spending where they were. And so our gift shop sales recovered really well. And we were actually pretty much on par with the previous year's sales for the gift shop. Again, we have a great crew of volunteers here from all of our incredible board members. This year at our AGM, we had 3 new board members come on, Terry Dale, Linda Dixon, and Leslie Pernkey, to add to our great board that we already had. Our volunteers do anything we ask them to, gardening, building things, helping with events, working in the archives. And we certainly really appreciate all of them. Due to the closure, prior to the closure, we'd had a couple of events that we managed to get in. Our annual Children's Christmas event. I did a talk for the Revelstoke Ski Club. We did a chili and bun ski history dinner that was a really big success. We could only fit 40 people in and managed to fill the building with a sold out event. We were before things went south, we were planning on doing the event next year, but possibly at the senior center where we could have more people attending. So when perhaps that's something we can do next year and look at other events like that as well. But some of our other big events that we normally look at just weren't able to happen this year. We could go to that. So I've been doing presentations for the last few years at Moberly Manor and Mount Cartier Court, and was able to do that until things shut down. But we received a little bit of funding from the Community Foundations of Canada, administered through Revelstoke Community Foundation, to create virtual programming for Mount Cartier Court. So I've been doing that, and that's going really well, and it's really kind of fun, and we're able to make it interactive, and they're actually able to link up at least 2 of the cottages at the same time. So it's a little bit interactive between the cottages as well. So we'll be continuing to do that. We were able to have some school visits going on before the shutdown. And then once things resumed in September and school was back in, we did have more classes in, but closed it down again in November. But I have done several Zoom classes since then. We've built up a really great group of school program volunteers. Many of them are retired teachers, and they're just fantastic. They really help us deliver strong curriculum-based school content, and we're actually just upgrading all of our curriculum programs now and adding in all of some of the digital assets that we've created as part of that. Walking tours, I wasn't able to get too many in last year because of conditions, but hopefully we'll be able to get back to that this year. One of the things that we are doing is recognizing that I won't be around forever, is we're actually creating narratives of my tours. So we'll have scripts of the tours, so the information will be there for other people to deliver as well. And Brown Bag History Talks, we were continuing on those until March, and since then we've been delivering them over Facebook Live and Zoom, and that's been a very steep learning curve for me, but I'm finally kind of getting the hang of it. Although just when I think I've got the hang of it, there's a little glitch comes up and it throws me. But so we're actually using Zoom Webinar and sharing it to Facebook Live, and then we post them on our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is, we may have had 1 or 2 things on there before. Now we've got lots of content on our YouTube channel. We've got Brown Bag History Talks. I've even got older Brown Bag Talks that David Rooney filmed years ago. We've got those on our channel. We've been doing talks about some of the little tours of some of the exhibits here. We've got those posted. So we've been using that quite a bit. And as well with our social media, with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, we've been using more than we had before. I came up with a little idea when we were shut down to just keep the museum in front of people's consciousness, and created a little game called This or That, This and That, or This or That actually. And I would post 2 photographs and ask people to choose. And it's probably the best thing I've done on Facebook. It was really created a lot of interaction between people because, everybody had an opinion about which photograph they preferred. So that worked really, really well. Holly, our office manager, was taking part in something that the Yorkshire Museum in UK had started called Curator Battle, sharing favorite artifacts on a weekly theme. One of the weeks was Best Bum, and we don't have any nudes in our collection, but we do have a bear bum, B-E-A-R. So we posted our bear for that challenge. That particular challenge actually got coverage on As It Happens, and on their Facebook feed, I posted the picture that we'd included in that. So we got a lot of coverage that way. The next slide actually shows one of the posts that Holly did. It was their theme for that week was Best Party Object, and we have these pretty cool cake sandwich cutters that you make playing card sandwiches for your bridge party. So it was fun, but it was also a way to keep the museum in people's consciousness as well. We had our website was updated this year, and it has a fresh new look. It's easy to navigate. We're really happy with that, and our goal is to add an online store to the website this year. We were able to apply for a grant to help us with that, and we're just waiting to see if that's coming through. We were able to access quite a bit of funding, so we were able to access the wage subsidy, and there was also special grants made available through the BC Museums Association, the Museums Assistance Program, and Columbia Basin Trust. And that really helped us to keep staff employed and help to compensate for losses of income, admission and program income. I guess my slides were a little bit out of, so I'd already talked about our website. That's just a little bit of what our website looks like. We're really happy with the look of it. One of our big projects that we've been working on for quite a while is the film project Washed Away, and we've finally completed that. It was directed by filmmaker Agathe Bernard, and the two of us did a lot of interviews, and we used some historic footage from CBC telling the story of displacement on the Columbia River. It's about a 20-minute film. We're really happy with it. It's really powerful companion piece to our Stories Beneath the Surface exhibit. And we hope to have a screening sometime later this year. These are a couple of pictures that were taken at Shelter Bay when we were filming Shelley Boyd, who is a representative from the Sinixt Nation, who came up, and just really breathtaking footage that we got of her, and stills as well. So we're really excited when we're finally get the chance to showcase that. Our summer students, had two students. They did fantastic work. They added close to 300 artifacts to our collections database. We didn't run our children's program for the first time in 20 years, but we're hoping to have a modified version of the program available this summer. Everybody knows about our Land of Thundering Snow exhibit. We've had that, our virtual exhibit and our on-site exhibit here since 2015. And we decided to take that to the next level. And with funding from Museum Assistance Program and Parks Canada, we created a traveling version of the Land of Thundering Snow exhibit. And it opened in Whistler in December of this past year, 2020. And it's scheduled to go to Salmon Arm for the summer and to Fernie for the fall and winter. And then I actually had a call from the curator in Stewart, BC, which is, like right next to Alaska, and they want it there too. Because in Stewart, there was a major mining disaster there in the 1960s with more than 20 people who died. So it's very relevant to them as well. So the exhibit is going to be traveling for several years, and I know we're not going to have any trouble finding renters for it. What makes it easy for other museums to rent is that other museums can apply for funding to rent traveling exhibits. So we'll be getting a little bit of additional income from it, and sharing this really valuable, important content throughout the province and actually throughout the country, where we're expecting to get bookings from across Canada in the next few years. That's a picture of it where it's set up in Whistler right now. We had our usual great team, John Woods, Katrina Van Wyck, all the usual suspects doing the content for it. So we're really happy with how that turned out. Stories Beneath the Surface, that's our exhibit that we opened on site here in 2018. And then we received funding last year to create a virtual version of that will be hosted on the Virtual Museum of Canada. We're currently working on that, and that will be opening next year. We're also joining the BC Digitized History Project, which is funded by UBC Okanagan, to make archival collections online. There's no cost to us. We retain the rights to all content, and we'll be adding our photograph and map collections this year with other collections to follow. So that would be a really great way to make our collections more accessible to everyone. We were able to hire an intern through Young Canada Works, and Elizabeth began her 6-month term at the end of September, and she'll be finishing up just the end of this month. So we've only got a couple more weeks left with her, but she's done great work in the collections. And the really fun story is that she has an identical twin sister, and the Railway Museum hired her as their intern. So that was, I did a little newspaper article about that because it was kind of a fun story. We've had a lot of work done in the archives. We added more than 1,600 photos to our database in the past year, including all the Dickey photos and the Times Review photo collection. And so getting lots of work done there. And so a big thanks to our hardworking board members. They do a great job of keeping the museum going in the right direction, especially in this challenging year. And thanks to our wonderful volunteers, and thanks to the City of Revelstoke for their ongoing support.
Thanks, Cathy. I appreciate your presentation. I'm getting an echo. That's why I'm kind of hesitating. I'm not sure what's going on here with my sound. I'm impressed with your guidance and what you've done in the past year with us not being able to get in to see the museum for the most of the year, but you've done incredible things, and to your volunteers and to your staff, kudos. We appreciate all that you're doing. And when I look at this, and I have to grin because there's so many things that you're able to get done in a time where most of us couldn't get things done. So for looking forward to what the museum holds for the future. Appreciate that. The one question I do have is, can you tell the twins apart?
Yes, because they have different purses.
There we go.
One has a black purse, one has a white purse.
Oh, awesome.
That's about it. And slightly different glasses.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Councillor Palmer, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Cathy, yeah, wonderful work. And at the beginning, you said that you alluded that you might not be with us forever. However, in your presentation, I think you proved that you will be with us forever. And I'm happy about that. It reminded me, I was down at the Dali Museum in St. Pete, Florida, a couple of years ago. And there, Dali is a virtual reality, and you can even get after having a conversation with him, you can get a picture with Dali. It might be something you might want to, I don't know, maybe you could do a business trip down to Florida. Sorry, staff. But yeah, great work, and just wonderful to hear all this stuff, and great to hear that you'll be with us for a very, very long time. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, as to that, I actually just sent off my paperwork to get paid for being old this year. So I turned 65 in the summer. But I am planning on staying around for a while yet, because I'm still having fun for the most part. That's
awesome. We appreciate that, Cathy. Any more comments from you, Cathy, as to any of the things at the museum?
No, I think that's it. To say, we've got such a great staff here. They accomplish great work. I'm just so thankful for everybody who steps foot in the museum. It's a vibrant and positive place.
Great. Thank you again for what you're doing there and for your volunteers and staff. Councillor Elliott, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. I was just wondering, Cathy, how has the winter been in terms of traffic? You said it picked up with the summer months in July and August, but tell me about the winter. Has it been?
The winter's been very, very slow.
Yeah.
Our sales are down. Visitorship is down very considerably. We usually have really good numbers in the winter, and that's just not happening this year. So, we recognize we're not out of the woods yet, and our board prepared a very cautious budget this year, just recognizing that things are not going to bounce back immediately. But we're hopeful for the summer, especially with the recent announcements from Dr. Bonnie Henry that with the vaccine rollout and encouraging provincial travel. So we're hopeful that things will bounce back. But yes, it's definitely been a hit for us. And of course, we're not getting the program income. I'd normally have like 30 to 40 people at a brown bag history talk, and we're not getting those people in the door. We're not getting that income. So we're recognizing that things are not over in terms of being back to normal quite yet, and recovering some of that income.
So you're looking into the summer again. So would you think July, August again would be the winter months for you, or what's your take? Is it going to rebound pretty quickly?
Yeah, July and August are generally really good months for us anyway. So we have we're looking forward to having good numbers there. We might look at ways to try to increase numbers, do a little bit more advertising than we normally do. Look at some other places where we can advertise to pick up some of that provincial traffic.
Okay, great. And just one more, what's it look like on the terms of funding from the provincial and the federal government? Are they looking to continue with the support for the arts and museum type entities?
I haven't seen anything this year about special funding as we did last year, but general program funding is good. For example, Young Canada Works, where we get funding for our students, they've increased the share that they normally pay. So normally they would pay 75% of the costs for having a student. This year they've taken that to 85%. So there's some there, but I don't think we'll see the big program or the big assistance grants that we did last year. But we, I've got pretty good radar for grants. So anything that's out there, we watch for it, and we apply for anything that we can. We just got word this week that we got a tech grant from CBC, nonprofit tech. So that'll help us to get a couple of new laptops. We wanted to have one laptop dedicated just for visitors. So we're able to just access whatever funding that we can.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Councillors, any other comments or questions for Cathy? All right, seeing none, Cathy, thank you again for your presentation and for always taking care of the museum on behalf of the community. We very much appreciate that. Thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, Council, we're going to move on to item number 8, Development Services. And it says presentation, but I don't believe we have a presentation. So I'm going to ask somebody to put this on the agenda, and then we'll have a brief discussion on that. Someone want to read the motion, please? Okay, so I'll read the motion that development cost charge amendment bylaw number 2288 be read at first, second, and third time. Someone want to second that for me, please?
I'll second. It looks like Don wants to say something.
Okay, sorry, Don. I'm just seeing your hand up in your photo. So, Ms. Lowe, you want to say, so Councillor Brooks Hill second it. Ms. Lowe, do you want to have a comment?
Just that there isn't a presentation, but I believe that Ms. Wade would like to talk to the report for council.
All right. Ms. Wade?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to bring to council's attention, I have noticed there's 120 calculation on page 11 of your report before you, and it's under residential single family C, and it says is it's $13,478, and it's actually $12,065. And I'm just asking Director McCabe to verify that so that we could make that amendment prior to doing the readings.
Ms. McCabe, any comment?
Sorry, Your Worship, I was muted. I'm just having a look at it now. I'm going to have to talk to Marianne. My apologies.
Okay, that's fine. So when we're looking at this bylaw, we're talking about cost charge increase according to CPI, and we're looking at 3.99% over up until present time over the last couple of years. Is that correct, Ms. Wade?
That's correct, Your Worship. And I just was reviewing everything, and I just found that there was just one tiny adjustment that needs to be made so that it's in line with the 3.99%.
All right. Councillors, any comments or questions? Councillor Elliott?
Yes, Your Worship. Back in when we first started on the council with the new group here, the inflationary approach to this DCCs wasn't acknowledged as a route we could go. Has something changed, or what's going on?
Ms. McCabe or Ms. Wade, please.
Yes, to Your Worship. This was discussed in one of our workshops with council, and the council's priorities has been to bring forward the DCCs. Yeah. There's an exemption under the legislation that allows us, because we made a amendment to the DCCs in 2018 when Thomas Perks was brought in to be able to utilize the exception bylaw to bring in the consumer price index for 3.99%, which represents a period of time from May 2018 to the end of this year, December 31st, 2020. This is a modest increase. There's two other options that we have available to us. One is a full DCC update, which the previous council had initiated under prior to this council coming on, and by McElhaney, and that did not move forward. We are in the process of updating all our master plans to inform a full DCC update, which will be coming later. A minor update we have also discussed, but given the how it was calculated in 2005, it would not be it would not be under the same formulas the current inspector would want to see. So it is not recommended to move forward with that. And this is an opportunity that we only have once a year for a period of 4 years from the time the DCC bylaw was amended in 2018 to do a modest increase of 3.99% with the consumer price index, and we do not have to go back to the inspector. So this meets council's objectives to do a DCC bylaw minor update to the existing infrastructure projects.
Ms. Lowe.
Your Worship, yeah, it's okay. Your Worship, I just wanted to make sure that Marianne was acknowledged to have a bit of a statement here. Also, Marianne, you did some engagement with the building that you might want to talk about, the building industry.
That's correct. Thank you, Ms. Lowe. Yes, we did meet. We have a monthly meeting that we meet with the building and developer community. We brought this forward to them. We explained the legislation and why we were doing this, and they were supportive of where we were going with this, and they understood certainly that costs have increased. The cost of these projects that are in our current DCC would, if we looked at them in today's prices, would well exceed 40% increase. So this is a very moderate increase to put some additional funds into the DCC reserves in order that we can mitigate cost of borrowing for some of these projects.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Rind.
I'll let Councillor Rind go ahead.
Councillor Rind.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just looking here, and when it says that the major DCC update would take over a year, what are those necessary plans to get that in place? And like, my understanding is that a lot of those are underway, but I'm curious if you could just provide a small update on what would be required to do a major update.
Through your worship to Councillor Ryan. Yes, we've outlined that on page 2 of your report. And it talks about what we need to do for the major update. And what we have to do is a full engagement with the community. And then once we have an endorsement with the community, we would have to go to the inspector, and the inspector would take 2 to 3 months for approval. So once we get our master plans completed, which would be in the fall of this year, then we have to identify the DCC projects, and we'll have to bring forward an engagement process for the DCC update major. And then once we go through that process, we would have to go to the inspector of municipalities.
So, sorry, I should have rephrased that differently. So my question is about the master plans that are required in order to do a major DCC update. Where are we at in getting those updated, and which ones are still outstanding?
So through your worship to Councillor Rind, as I was saying, the reports will be done in the fall. These are the reports that we've outlined in the OCP updates. These are the liquid waste treatment plan, the master parks plan, the transportation master plan, water and storm. And we need to have all those reports completed so we can do a comprehensive analysis of what DCC projects we require to support the future growth of the OCP.
Yeah, because the transportation plan we have in our agenda today, and I think it's not scheduled to be complete until the end of 2021. So that's not the fall, but that is one of the plans that's required, right?
That's correct.
And all of these are at least underway in that they're either being done or we have an RFP out to have them completed, right?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. I can't speak to all the engineering ones, but I am aware of the liquid waste treatment plant, and I am aware of the master transportation plan. Okay,
awesome. And then in the minor DCC update on that page 2, it does mention that some of the costs do not have the level of detail currently desired by the ministry. Can you please just talk about that a little bit more? Like, what would be an example of some of those details?
So what happens through your worship to Councillor Ryan, there's a formula that the ministry looks at, and I apologize, I don't have all that detailed information because it's quite detailed and specific, but they have formulas on how they go about calculating them. And my understanding is those formulas have changed since 2005 to 2020, and that formula would not be justified anymore by the inspector. And that has come from the consultants that we're working with, and that would have to be re-looked at. So when they looked at our DCC bylaws, recommended that we would not be able to do a cost update to bring the current projects to 2020 or 2021 costing, because there's a different process now because it's been such a long period of time.
Right. So that's why it would take 3 to 4 months of work by the city as outlined in the report.
Correct.
Gotcha. So I guess I'm curious to hear, well, I have one other question. So the changes that are being proposed for the 3.99% increase, those would come online and affect all the upcoming projects that are currently in the pipeline, like the golf course and the new hotel at the ski hill, things like that, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Ryan, it all depends where the applications are in the process. If you do not have an application in before the adoption, then yes, it would. If you have applications in, then they're under the current DCCs.
That's unfortunate. So I guess anything, so say we adopt it today, then, or whenever, if it has to go through another approval, whenever that date is, any application that was submitted before then has the old DCCs applied to it?
Correct.
Bummer. Okay. And then I just have one last question.
One more? Okay.
Yep. So curious to hear what other councillors think about a minor DCC update. I understand that the CPI one sounds like a great starting point. I think I'm curious also, like the major DCC update, if that's already going to happen like next year, maybe it doesn't make sense to do a minor DCC update, but if it's going to be 2 years from now, then it seems like a minor update is worth it because there's so many projects in the pipeline that it might be worthwhile to get those rates increased as soon as possible. So curious what other people have to say about that.
Any comment, Ms. Wade, before I move on to other councillors?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say that the minor update will probably take longer because the current formula that was used will have to reflect what is currently being utilized. So I'm not sure that from staff's perspective, it's probably best to do the complete major update and get the right formula and do the right consultation and get the right DCC projects in after the master plan is the master plans are completed.
All right, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just have one. I have several questions, so I'll just have one question, and then I'll let Councillor Shirley go ahead of me. So I'm just wondering how much council's been engaged since this council's been engaged in having discussions around direction and policy as far as the DCCs. This was the major election issue 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, and I think most of the candidates at that time were promising the DCCs to be a priority, and now a long time has passed. So I'm just sort of wondering how much council's been engaged. It sounds like there was a workshop or something, both for my benefit and also for the community to know how much has happened in the past couple of years.
Ms. Wade, do you want to weigh in on anything, or Ms. Lowe? I'm just going to say that when we were elected, this council was raring to go on dealing with the DCCs, and my comment to them was to, because the previous DCC bylaw had failed, to just let the community calm down for a bit before we re-engaged. And so we've talked about this a few times. And Ms. Wade, any comments since you've been with the city that you would like to make on this?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I know that since I have arrived with the city, this was a council priority. We've had various discussions, either at committee of the whole, finance committee, about how best to move forward with this. There's been a number of master plans that need to be done to best inform a major update to the DCCs that aligns with the OCP and the projected growth timelines for a 20-year horizon to 2041. So doing a major requires that we complete these and do the proper community consultation. So that is a fairly time-consuming process. And when this was started, when I was here, we did not have these master plans in place, and we needed the time to do that, along with the population study for the OCP. We've come together now, and we are in the process of doing those master plans to better inform and update. So trying to find other tools is what we've been trying to do. And with this exemption, CPI, it gives a modest increase to the development cost charges, which have not been increased since 2008, and would assist in making council priorities for updating DCCs to the infrastructure.
Great, thank you, Ms. Wade. Mr. Palmer, Councilor Palmer, did that answer your question?
Yeah, mostly. In the discussions that council had, did council give staff the direction to take this approach of the cost of living increase? It sounded like from Councillor Elliott that was a suggestion, but wasn't viable at the time 2 years ago, I'm just wondering what direction council gave to staff, so I just understand that.
Okay, Ms. Lowe, would you like to weigh in?
So, Your Worship, Ms. Wade can probably talk to this as well as Mr. Black, but the initial discussions were that we were looking into what would be a minor and what would be a major. And so in that investigation, which was direction from council to check out what it was that we could do that would give us some benefit sooner than waiting till the very end of a 4-year term, what we found out was that there was an exemption when we did do an amendment to the DCC bylaw in 2018 that did allow us to do a minor amendment that could be done immediately and give us a little bit more money for the infrastructure that we need to do right now. So it was something that we came across while we were investigating what was the difference between a major and a minor. The initial question from council was to look at backing it right up to 2008, the last time that we actually did an increase. We can't do that, but what we did find was that we could do this small minor increase from the last time that we did an amendment. The amendment that we did to the DCC bylaw was to include the Thomas Brook area in the DCCs, and that's what's allowed us to do this small CPI amendment. So that is what's in front of council right now for consideration.
Great. I'll go to Ms. Wade and then back to Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Charlotte. Ms. Wade.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just to add on to what Ms. Lowe was saying, further consideration is that we only have this opportunity for 4 years. And so as of 2018, we have 4 years. And after that, we can no longer do the CPI. So the only opportunity is to move forward with it now. And we did discover this when we were comparing the major and minor that council had requested us to research. And so we've brought this forward as a modest approach because we have the opportunity. And if we go past the 4 years, we will not be able to do this.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Councillor Palmer, further comment?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you to staff. So I'm definitely not questioning the information here. Really, the debate should be around, well, the motion on the table is a bylaw for second and third reading. And really, the debate is around the merits at this point, the merits between these three different approaches. And it seems to me that we've jumped that step. And correct me, other councillors, correct me if I'm wrong. But looking at these three options, it's hindsight now for sure. This should have been a separate debate and then giving staff instruction to create a bylaw for consideration. And here we're jumping into the three readings on something that it seems to me what I'm hearing is the first debate on the merits of three different approaches. So that's my comment. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Charlotte.
Great, thanks, Your Worship. Just to clarify, I do remember having a conversation around the benefits of CPI increase versus minor increase, or minor update versus a major update. And I see where there could be some confusion on those tiers of efforts going on. And I just want to point out, I look at this as a both and rather than an either or. We are in the process of working towards a major update to our DCCs. And my question that I originally had has to do with that, where the minor update, it sounds like would be prohibitive and just doesn't make sense. We might as well do a major update if we're going to put that much work into it. And in the meantime, we can do the CPI update to get that moderate increase. I can't remember when we talked about it, but I do remember having this in my notes that this seemed like a good both and situation. my question, and I just want to follow up on this long process of getting to that full major update of the DCCs. We were talking about the project decision. So which projects are a DCC project versus which projects are just due to the existing population. And the way Ms. Wade was talking about the formulas for the DCCs and that process and how that should be a separate process from our master plans. I'm assuming this has to do with those changed formulas. I would just like to have confirmation on that that process to choose those DCC projects is separate and cannot, or is it possible to roll that into those master plans and the scope of the master plans, or is it a completely separate conversation?
Ms. Wade.
Thank you, Worship, through to Councillor Schlett. So the master plans will inform the DCC projects, and you're correct. It'll be a separate process because once we have the facts that will come out of the master plans, we can then identify those projects, and we will be consulting with the community on it. And also to a point that you had raised, the only reason why we have the 3 approaches in here is because we did talk about the previous ones, and that the CPI is something we can immediately embark upon because of the exemption, and we have this opportunity over 4 years, which would fulfill council's priorities to update the DCC projects. It doesn't preclude us looking at the other 2.
Right. And if I could, Your Worship, just to follow up on that, just so that we understand, we're confirming that in those master plans, as these RFPs are going out and these plans are coming forward, within that scope, they know what information you need to inform the DCCs, correct?
Yes, Wade.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Schlett. Yes. So all the departments are working. They're taking the OCP numbers over the 20 horizon, and they're also doing full build out that we know of as well. We have 2 numbers, and so they are informing the master plans, and then we will have to look at it, over time, what we need, etc. It's a big undertaking.
It's the cart and the horse, right? It's good to hear that the cart is being built so that when the horse is ready, we're ready to go. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Charlotte. So any further comments on the motion on the table, councillors? Councillor Elliott?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm just curious whether if we implement the CPI adjustment, does it influence the time where we can implement a major update on the DCCs?
No.
No, so we can do that once we get that ready. We can implement as it's prepared. Correct. Okay, great. Go ahead.
Any other councillor? Councillor Palmer or Councillor Brooks-Hill? I just see your hand up.
I just wanted to say that I'm going to be voting in favor of this. I believe this is a modest increase that's not going to significantly change things, but it's still, more money that's coming in for some of our much needed future projects. And in terms of sort of that getting sidetracked discussion about which approach is the best, I'm in favor of doing the major DCC update and hopefully getting that done before the end of our term.
Great, thank you, Councillor Brooks-Hill. This is something that we did talk about not long after we were elected about doing a major, and then we talked about how could we do a short term to make up for lost ground, sort of thing. So this is not new to this council, just another way of going about it. So Councillor Charlotte, I thought I saw your hand up, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Palmer. Okay, you're good, Councillor Palmer.
So, Your Worship, without a fuller, more robust discussion, I guess I'm somewhat conflicted on this resolution. One of the major concerns that I have with the increases is to deal with secondary suites. So our secondary suites are going up. Yes, it's a modest amount, but it's approaching $4,500. Our community has dozens of illegal suites, and I think one of the the impediments for people legalizing their suites is the large DCCs. So it's like an incentive to not go through the proper processes. I do have another question that I don't know the answer. So there's the proposed vacation rentals that's pretty much citywide that's being proposed. Will they be subject to DCCs like secondary suites? That's a question I don't know the answer to.
Ms. Wade, do you care to weigh in?
Through your worship, we do have secondary suite bylaws that are currently in the DCC bylaw. So they would be adjusted according to that. Did I answer Councillor Palmer's question?
Councillor Palmer?
No, the secondary suites are clearly, and they're in most of the zones. The current rate for someone wanting to develop a secondary suite is $4,277. In this proposed amendment would increase it to $4,448. So I understand that. That's for secondary suites. My question is, the proposed vacation rentals, will they be subject to DCCs or not?
This way.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, as we discussed at the secondary, at the short-term rental, that we're looking at the water and sewer utility costs that we would have updated and adjusted in accordance to other municipalities and best practices in regards to short-term rental. The DCCs would be paid for the secondary suite or the second unit, so it depends on, I think where you're trying to go is saying is if they're building specifically a vacation rental, or I like to call it a short-term rental, that they would be charged DCC. So it's the same as the secondary suite. So if they're building a secondary suite that is going to be used for short-term rental, they would look at the secondary suite DCCs.
Okay, so Your Worship, I'll give an example because it's not clear in my mind. So for new construction, if there is, whether it's vacation rental or a secondary suite, if I'm hearing correctly, then there would be DCCs in both of those cases. For an existing house, say, for example, an existing house in Arrow Heights, that doesn't have vacation rental or does not have secondary suites at this point, but goes through the process so that they can have a secondary suite, they will be charged the DCCs, I understand. So in the case for someone that's doing a vacation rental, would they also be, that has an existing house, would they be charged DCCs or not?
Ms. Wade?
So through your worship, because the DCC bylaw refers to secondary suite, that's where the DCCs are collected. It doesn't actually say vacation rental in there, because what has happened is it's been, what I can tell from historically in interpretation, is that if it's a vacation rental, it's been treated as a secondary suite. And you also have to look at the cost of construction, because there's an exemption in the DCC bylaw. Anything under 100,000 does not have to pay a DCC bylaw fee.
Okay. I think that answers that question. So, Your Worship, I believe I'm going to be voting against this bylaw on a couple of reasons. One, I don't know that we have a robust enough understanding to make a really good decision. I am concerned about affordable housing for the community, and by increasing DCCs for secondary suites is another increment of making affordable housing more difficult. It's my position, subject to more input, that we should be reducing DCCs for infill and for secondary suites to help sort of a more responsible and greater density in existing areas, because it has less impact on sewers and in an incremental way. So that's my position. I believe I'll be voting against this. If it was just for clarity, I guess, Your Worship, we're going to 3 readings. I certainly would be much more comfortable with a slower reading, first reading. I know I kind of initiated that last time, so I'm not going to do that again this time unless other councils are wanting to go that route. I would be supportive. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Palmer. Ms. Wade, do you have a comment before I make a statement?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you very much. I just wanted to verify that we're all very concerned about housing, and I want to make it clear that the DCC bylaws for secondary suite are for construction value that is over 100,000. So if the value of the suite is under 100,000 for construction, DCCs are not collected.
Great, thank you for that comment. Definitely, when I look at this bylaw, this is something that this council has been asking for since day one. It's a great way to get a small increase into the DCC charges. And the fact that the community builders have weighed in and are supportive of this moving forward. I definitely am supportive of this moving forward. We've talked about this many times over the last couple of years, and I believe that this is the appropriate way to go. Still gives us the opportunity to do that major DCC update before the end of our term to look at what's going to be best for the community as a whole, and we get some of the DCC projects in line with what we need for our community. So definitely I'm supportive of this moving forward. We are all concerned about housing and moving that forward, and I think it's a suitable thing to move forward. So Ms. McCabe, you have a comment, then I'll go back to Councillor Palmer one last time.
Yes, Your Worship. I'm just going to clarify that the numbers in the bylaw are correct, so it is good the way it is.
Great. Councillor Palmer, one last comment.
Just further to your comment, Your Worship. So we'll go through the what's the timeline, the expected timeline that this will be complete and adopted by the province? So there is the provincial approval. What's approximately what would be anticipated for that?
On this resolution ahead of us, Ms. Wade?
Through to Your Worship, this does not go to the province in this case. It's an exemption as per the legislation as outlined in the report. So it'll come back to council for adoption at the next meeting.
Great, thank you for that comment, Councillor Palmer.
Okay, thank you. And then, Your Worship, you were, I think, optimistically stating that we should have the full DCC bylaw that do the major before the end of this term. I think that's fairly ambitious. We have the master plans, which was noted that the roads master plan, and I don't know if the Director of Engineering is online here as well, but the liquid waste management plan. So do you think that's realistic that we might be able to have the full deal done?
Well, I'm optimistic, but I'm seeing Ms. Wade nod her head no, so maybe I'm too optimistic.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
All right. So, councillors, any further comment on the motion on the table? I will ask the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Please note that Councillor Palmer is opposed and the rest of the council are in favor. This motion is passed. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 10B, Development Services. We have a presentation with an ALR exclusion. So, Ms. Wade, do you have that presentation, or is Mr. Simon on with that?
Through Your Worship, Erica Hartling is going to present for you.
Okay, Ms. Hartling, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just share my screen right now.
Your Worship, I believe you jumped ahead. Yeah.
Yes, okay. I have. I apologize for that. I'm looking at things here, and I go jumped ahead. So we'll go to staff reports 10A, just received for information. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Rind, please.
That development, that the 2021 local government election results report from the Chief Election Officer dated February 23rd, 2021 be received for information.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Charlotte, any discussion on the motion? We know the results. We have Councillor Palmer sitting at the table. So again, congratulations, Councillor Palmer. And so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the ALR exclusion, Ms. Hartling.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just share my screen. Just before I continue, I just want to make sure you can see the presentation in front of you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So staff will be presenting 2 ALR exclusion applications for council's consideration. The 2 applications are for adjacent properties, and I'll be presenting the ALR 2020-01 for 1853 Camozzi Road, which is in front of you right now, first for council consideration. And then I'll present ALR 2020-02 for 1842 Hay Road. So the subject property owners of 1853 Camozzi Road have applied to exclude their property from the ALR, and they provided a summary letter with their rationale, which is attached to the council report. The staff recommendation is that the application be forwarded to the ALC, recommending approval. And if council is supportive of the staff recommendation, the resolution on the screen before you would be sent to the ALC. The ALC will then review the application, the council report, and council's recommendation, and they'll make the final decision on the exclusion application. Should council not wish to support staff's recommendation of approval, council can consider one of the 3 council options that I'll outline at the end of my presentation. Just a bit of a presentation summary. I'll be going over the background, the property details surrounding land use of the property, the ALR history and soil capability, policy direction, staff evaluation, some of the referral agency comments, public notification, and then conclude with a staff recommendation and the council options. So the subject property is 1853 Camozzi Road, located within the Arrow Heights neighborhood. The property is approximately 2 acres and contains a single-family dwelling and accessory building. It is serviced by on-site septic and municipal water, and the property falls within the Agricultural Land Reserve. It's zoned rural residential 1 hectare, and it's designated ALR in the OCP. The surrounding land use to the north of the subject property will be future single-family dwelling, 2-family, and multifamily residential subdivision. To the south is single-family residential subdivision. To the east is the existing industrial sawmill and the gun range. And to the west is neighboring ALR property, which is currently used for residential purposes, a single-family residential subdivision, and the future Mackenzie Village lands. So in 2004, the city applied to the ALC for a bulk ALR exclusion application. This was to exclude private properties located in Arrow Heights and the resort lands neighborhoods. The subject property owners, who are the current owners of the property today, were given the option to be included in the city's bulk ALR exclusion application, but they decided not to be included as they were currently using the property as a hobby farm. All other property owners in this area agreed to the city proceeding with the exclusion application, and the ALC did approve the application. You can see it before you here, the properties that are outlined in green. The subject property that was not included in the exclusion is outlined in red. For the soil capability, the Canada Land Inventory mapping shows that the soils over the property are class 4 with a subclass of MP, which is soil moisture deficiency and stoniness. and an improved capability rating is not provided for this area, which might indicate that improvements may not be considered practical. Staff have evaluated the application in accordance with the ALC Act, the OCP, and the zoning bylaw. And the application meets the policies for exclusion, as the subject property is approximately 2 acres in size, currently used for residential and is surrounded by smaller residential lots. The minimum parcel size for subdivision under the current zone is 1 hectare. Any future development to increase density or change use will require a rezoning and OCP amendment application. The removal of the parcel from the inventory of agricultural lands will not break up the integrity and continuity of the ALR land base, as there are no ALR lands surrounding the 2 subject properties, both which are under the exclusion applications. There's no ALR or surrounding agricultural operations that would be impacted by the removal of these 2 properties from the surrounding, removal of these properties from the ALR. And due to the size of the subject property and the surrounding residential properties, urban agriculture and gardens may be an appropriate scale of farming on the property, but a larger farm operation that is permitted in the ALR may adversely impact adjacent residential properties. Given that horticulture and farming are listed in the current RR1 zone of the property, removal from the ALR does not impede current farming activities for minor urban agriculture. And staff note that they are currently in the process of drafting amendments to the zoning bylaw to allow food production, crops, and greenhouses. And this would be on any parcel of land in the city, which will support small scale urban agriculture for the community as a whole. This is in line with the community goals of the OCP and by allowing and encouraging local food production. If the previous owners of the property owners had agreed to exclude their land, so it is the current property owners, the slide says previous. So if the current property owners had agreed to exclude their land as part of the 2004 bulk ALR exclusion application, the land would have been removed from the ALR with the neighboring lots in 2004. So staff did send out the application to referral agencies, including Engineering and Public Works, Fire and Rescue Services, Parks, Recreation and Culture, Finance, Community Economic Development, Interior Health, BC Hydro, Fortis BC, TELUS, RCMP, and BC Ministry of Agriculture. Ministry of Agriculture did come back with comments on the application that are attached to the council report. In summary, they said, although the ministry is generally not supportive of excluding land that is capable of agricultural production from the ALR, the ministry recognizes that given the size of the subject properties and their relative location, it is unlikely they will ever be used for agriculture. All other referral agencies did respond with either no comments or concerns. So before filing their application with the ALC, the property owners had to complete a public notification process. This involved posting a notice of exclusion sign, placing a notice of application in that local newspaper, which was placed September 3rd and September 10th of 2020 in the Revelstoke Review. And they're to serve a copy of the signed exclusion application and a copy of the notice of exclusion application to ALR properties sharing a common boundary that may be impacted, which is the adjacent property that is under the ALR exclusion application, ALR 2020-02. And no submissions were received for the subject property's exclusion application. Staff do note that submissions were received for the neighboring property application. And this may be because they posted their notices before the subject properties, but that's just what staff has interpreted. The staff recommend that the application be forwarded to the ALC recommending approval. If council is supportive of staff recommendation, the resolution on the screen can be considered and sent to the ALC. The ALC then will review the application as discussed, the council report and council's recommendation. And then they would make the final decision on the exclusion application and notify the applicant and the city of the decision. Should council not wish to support staff recommendation of approval, council can consider one of the following 3 options. Should council wish to send a recommendation to the ALC to refuse the application, the following resolution can be considered and sent to the ALC. And as noticed on the previous slide, the ALC review reviews the application, the council report, and council's recommendation, and they will still make the final decision on the exclusion application and notify the city and the applicant. Should council wish to not send the application to the ALC, this would be based solely on Section 34A of the ALC Act, and this is specifically where an application applies to land that is zoned by bylaw which permits farm use. So as the RR1 zone permits farm use, for this subject property, council could consider this resolution. And if this resolution is chosen, then staff will send the resolution only and not the council report and the application to the ALC. This is for this subject property only and will not apply to the next application they'll be presenting. Should council wish to pass a resolution to forward the application to the ALC with no comments, the following resolution can be considered. And if you have no comments, then the resolution with no comments, the staff report, and the application will be sent to the ALC for final review and decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hartling. I appreciate the presentation. So, Council, is there one of these that you'd prefer to move forward? Councillor Ryan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering what the difference is between this application and the next one.
Ms. Hartling.
Through your worship, I will be presenting. It's a very similar presentation for the next application, but because they're applied for separately, they will be presented separately. But the application that you will be seeing shortly is not zoned for farm use, so it's zoned RR04. So it does not fall under that subsection. So there'd be staff recommendation of approval and two council options, either forward to refuse the application or forward with no comments, but the application must go to the ALC for final review and decision. So the difference is the size of the property and the zoning.
So this one has the zoning for farming or no? Or yeah, this one does, but the next one doesn't?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Charlotte.
Great, thank you, your worship. I'm in support of the first option to recommend exclusion from the ALC. I think that's correct. I don't think we have.
Okay, do you want to put that motion? Do you want to put that motion on the table?
I am happy to do so. That agricultural land reserve application number ALR 2020-01, exclusion in the ALR for 1853 Camozzi Road, lots 1, section 23, township 23, range 2, west of the 6th Meridian Kootenay District. Plan NEP 72449 be forwarded to the Provincial Agricultural Land Commission recommending approval this 9th day of March 2021.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Ryan.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm in support of this. I think that Arrow Heights, the neighborhood decision on whether ALR has a place in that neighborhood was made back in 2004. I really appreciated the presentation today. It made it very clear on what happened to the neighboring properties and why it makes sense to let these ones, or to recommend that these properties be removed from the ALR. Typically, I'm a big fan of local food in all aspects of that, and I think the ALR is an important part or important piece of that policy. But if we're going to embed community food security and local food production into policy decisions, I think there are other routes we can take. I'm looking forward to the conversation on Thursday when we look at how this fits into all of our zones. And I'm looking forward to having a robust conversation, because I think there is a lot of support for more agriculture within our city limits. But we want to set solid boundaries around that and make it realistic. Like I said, I think this neighborhood made their decision back in 2004, and I look forward to the decisions of the other neighborhoods in the future.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Charlotte. Councillor Rind, and then Councillor Palmer.
Thanks. I'm not sure if it only applies to the next application or if it was for both, but there was mention of some kind of errors maybe, or assumptions maybe by the owners that they weren't aware that their land was in the ALR. And I'm just wondering if there was anything that the city did that would mislead either of the two owners of those properties.
Ms. Hartling, I'm going to get you to weigh in, but I don't believe there is anything that was misled. It was back in the day where they could pull it out or not, whether the decision was a current landowner or a previous landowner. Ms. Hartling, any comment on that?
Yeah, through your worship. So the property on their title did not have where it says may be impacted by the Agricultural Land Reserve, which was put on by the Agricultural Land Commission. I have talked to the Agricultural Land Commission and it has been missed on titles. So they did not have that notation on the title, and with BC Assessment did not also know that it was in the Agricultural Land Reserve. This is not an error on the city's part. This has happened before with the Agricultural Land Commission not having the notation on the title. That was corrected right when the property owners realized that their property was in the Agricultural Land Reserve. The city does have it on their mapping, and we do show that it's in the agricultural land. So this was updated by BC Assessment, who determines taxes. So then this was also updated with finance as well. So it went out of a roundabout loop, but it was something that happened in the past that wasn't put on there.
And typically the tax is lower, right, for that type of use?
It's only the school, Ms. McKay may be able to weigh in, but it's only the school board or school district taxes that would be less, and those were updated for this year, I believe. I'm not sure if she wants to weigh in.
Ms. McKay, any comment?
Ms. Hartling's correct. The only property taxes that are actually impacted would be the school taxes. So it doesn't affect the city.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, then Councillor Brookshill.
Thank you, Your Worship. I very much appreciate the report. Very clear, easy to follow. Appreciative that it didn't assume any direction that council was going to necessarily take. Clear recommendation, and I appreciate all that. I think that possibly with for Councillor Ryan, the other thing that happens with agricultural land, I think there's some other tax benefits to owners that have farm status, but that's not relevant to our discussion. The little bit of a contradiction on the use of the soils about the suitability for farmland, and then saying that we're going to encourage the urban side. I just note that there seems to be this contradiction. Have sort of long-term concerns about the creep of ALR land being taken out over decades now. Basically, that the rationale of lands being taken out as there's an encroachment around the city. So like for example, this one, it kind of makes sense. And yet there's this loss of land over longer periods of time. And we certainly see that in the Lower Mainland in a big way. So philosophically, I have concerns. And yet it does make sense. And again, I appreciate the report. It was very, very clear to follow. So thank you for that.
Sir Brookshill, sorry, I was muted.
Sorry, everything went silent. A couple of things. First, to Councillor Ryan's point about the owners who were unaware when they bought the property. So it's not this current motion, it would be the next report. But since they filed the report, they've now sold the land. So it's now the owners bought it knowing that it was in the ALR and have continued with the application. So sort of the point is a bit moot about whether or not anyone was unaware, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks, Mike. Is that for the next one?
That's for the next one.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I think these people, the current one, they back in 2004 were offered to join the bulk exclusion process and decided not to, and now have decided to for whatever reasons. I'm not going to speculate on their reasons, but as Councillor Palmer said, you know, to me, philosophically, I'm against taking any land out of the ALR. We have insufficient farmland in BC to support our population, and our population's only growing. However, as the report makes clear, and I think it's very much true, if there was ever good candidates for land to be taken out of the ALR, these two are very small pieces. It's given the current sort of financial climate of real estate in that area, it's unlikely anyone will ever seriously farm these pieces of land. However, that's kind of part of the problem everywhere. So I have to say, I've been really torn about this one. I can't really decide which way I'm going to go, but I believe I will vote against it currently.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Any further comments, councillors? I will then ask the question. So the motion is approval of this to go to the Agricultural Land Commission, recommending approval. So Councillor Ryan and Councillor Palmer now have their hands up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Councillor Palmer, you can go first.
Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just another minor point on the viability of the land. Just noting that this was a hobby farm in the past, which would indicate from an agricultural perspective that it was viable. Once upon a time, it was viable. Just a minor point further to Councillor Brookshill.
Okay, Councillor Ryan, another comment?
Yeah, also, I don't know much about hydroponics, but I know that they don't involve soil, so that could also be viable, but like Councillor Brookshill was saying, it might not make sense in that location based on the value of the land. I'm voting against this motion, or I guess I'm, the one that's currently tabled to exclude it.
So the application is to recommend approval to the ALR on this piece of property. I'm supportive of it. The community is kind of landlocked up there. The people that own the property have been there a long time, and they've done hobby farm, and they're at a point where they're feeling that this is the best thing for their property. So I'm supportive of this moving forward. Having said that, is there any other comment before I call a question?
Yeah, just because it's one of the last few properties, and food security is becoming increasingly important and an issue for our community, especially given how remote we are. I will be voting against this, and I think it's also worth mentioning that I'm not sure what the subdivision requirements would be. I assume they'd have to go, it would be a whole separate process, but they could, in theory, like lease out that land for it to be farmed. Is that right? Like if it stays the way it is?
Yeah, anybody could lease out their land if they want to use it for something else. So.
And because the current use allows, it's RR1 or RR4 or whatever it is, then yeah, I'm going to be voting against it.
Okay, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Palmer, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Your Worship. I will very reluctantly voting in support of the application, of the motion. And I think the saving grace piece for me is that the city as a whole is moving to create more urban farming viability in the whole community. So it is with reluctance but I will be voting in favor of the motion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, great. Councillor Ron?
Yeah, I'm very excited about those zoning bylaws to come to fruition, but it's been pretty slow going. So part of my hesitation in voting to support this motion is because we don't have them in place yet. And I'd like to see those in place before we support to take any of the land out of the ALR.
Okay, thanks for your comments. Any further comments? I will now ask the question. All those in favor of approving this to go to the ALR, please raise your hand. So we have 4 in favor, I believe. Opposed, please raise your hand. So note, Councillor Brooks Hill, Councillor Rind are opposed. The motion has been carried. Let's move on to item number C, Ms. Hartling.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is quite a similar application, just a few differences. So the subject property owners have applied to remove their property from the ALR to allow for a land use designation in residential zoning that's consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. They have noted in their application that if the application is successful, the owners would prepare and submit an application to the city to rezone and redesignate in order to be able to subdivide. Their intention would be to build a second dwelling, and the owners have stated that they have family needs for housing and the housing supply in the city is low. The staff recommendation is that the application be forwarded to the ALC, recommending approval. Should council not wish to support the staff recommendation of the application, there are 2 options outlined at the end of the presentation, similar to the one you just looked at, without the one with the Section 30 clause. A similar overview, going over the background of the property details surrounding land use, ALR history and soil capability, policy direction, referral agency comments, public notification, and staff recommendation and council options. So the subject property is the neighboring property that you just reviewed an application for to the west of the property. It's located at 1842 Hay Road within Arrow Heights neighborhood. It's approximately 1 acre in size and contains a single-family dwelling and currently has a dilapidated mobile home used for storage, a small storage building, and a garage and workshop. This is what the owners plan to remove if approved and continue on with their development applications. Serviced by an on-site septic and municipal water, and the property falls within the agricultural land reserve zoned rural residential 4-hectare district and designated ALR in the OCP. You can see the subject property here with the surrounding land use. To the north was a recent application that was approved by council for the future single-family, 2-family, multi-family residential subdivision. The south is single-family residential subdivision. The east is the ALR property you just reviewed, and then to the west is residential subdivision and the future expansion of Mackenzie Village lands. And just a bit of the ALR history is the same as you just reviewed. The difference is the subject property owners at the time that the city did go through the bulk ALR exclusion application were the owners of the neighboring property you just reviewed. And they were given the option to go through the city's bulk ALR exclusion application, but decided to not be included. And all other properties in the green boundary were excluded by the, excluded by in the ALR. The soil capability is class 4 with the soil moisture deficiency and stoniness. Similar evaluation to the previous application. The application meets the policies for exclusion as a subject property is 1 acre in size. The current use is residential and is surrounded by smaller residential lots. The minimum parcel size for subdivision in the 0.4 hectare RR04 zone is 0.4 hectares. And so any future development with the owner's increased density or reply to subdivide the property would require a rezoning, a successful rezoning and OCP amendment application that would go forward to council if this was approved. The removal of the parcel from the inventory of agricultural lands will not break up the integrity and continuity of the land base of the ALR. There are no other ALR properties that would be broken up with these exclusions. Staff are currently in the process, as noted in the previous application, of doing amendments to the zoning bylaw to allow for food production crops and greenhouses. This is something that staff would be presenting to Committee of the Whole at March 11th, generally just to have support with that. And this is in line with the community goals of the OCP, by allowing and encouraging local food production. Last note is if the previous property owners had agreed to exclude their land as part of the 2004 bulk exclusion application, the land would have been removed in the ALR with the neighboring properties. And the referral agencies are the same comments that came back on the previous application you just looked at. Ministry of Agriculture made comments on both the applications in one letter, and all other referral agencies responded with no comments or concerns. And the landowners of this subject property application did post a notice of exclusion sign and advertisements in the paper before the previous application you just looked at. They posted these in the Revelstoke Review August 20th and August 28th of 2020. And they serve a copy of the signed exclusion application and a copy of the notice of exclusion application to the neighboring property. As this application was advertised earlier, that may be why there were written submissions received. So staff did receive 10 public submissions, and this was before the city received a formal ALR application. And these 10 submissions received for both in support and opposition of the exclusion application, and they are linked in the staff report for council and the ALC's consideration. The staff are recommending approval to be sent to the ALC, and if council is supportive of staff recommendation, the resolution in front of you can be considered and sent to the ALC, and the ALC will review the application and have the final decision. Excuse me. Should council not wish to support staff recommendation, there are two other options that can be considered. That would be to recommend refusal to be sent to the ALC for review and a final decision, or to send no comments to the ALC and they would still have final review and decision. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ms. Hartling. Councillors, is there any one of you that want to put the recommendation in front of us on the docket here? Someone want to make this motion to recommend to go to ALC? Councillor Charlotte.
Sure, Your Worship. That agricultural land reserve application number ALR 2020-02, ALR 2020-02, exclusion in the ALR for 1842 Hay Road, as on the screen. I think I'm allowed to do that rather than be rattling out numbers.
Great. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Elliott, discussion on the motion. Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be voting in support of this motion like I did the previous motion. It is with some reluctance. I appreciate the comments of my fellow councillors on the last motion. It does break the heart a little bit to see this go. I think that my comment from the last presentation stands, is that this neighborhood made its decision a while ago. And all I can say is I really hope we do everyone proud in the policy decisions that we will be working towards on Thursday, to instill agriculture as a priority in our community through bylaws, through policies, and to do it in a way that is meaningful. I think these properties here are, the land value is so high, the decision was made before. So hopefully Thursday we can make some changes so that other properties will stay agricultural.
Great. All right, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm 49% opposed to this and 51% in favor. The one point that was different on this was the affordability of and supply of housing, and I think that's indicative of a bigger challenge for council on how do we make enable more inventory, how do we allow processing, and how do we have allow more infill and more affordability in the community. I will be voting in support. Thank you, Your Worship.
Great. Any other councillors with comments? Okay. Councillor Brookshill, and then Councillor Ron.
I just want to say quickly, I'm going to be voting against this for essentially the same reasons as the previous one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rind?
Likewise to Councillor Brooks Hill's comment. I think the other point that he had mentioned when we were discussing this last was also that the owners who are applying for this purchased it understanding that this was part of the ALR. So that's another reason why I'm against this.
Thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All those in favor of approving this to go to the ALR for their recommendation? Okay, opposed? Please raise your hand. So we have Councillor Rind and Councillor Brooks Hill opposed, and the rest of council in favor. So this motion is approved to go to the ALR. So thank you again, Ms. Hartling, for your report. Appreciate that. We're going to move on to item D, 10D, engineering. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Elliott.
That Stantec Consulting Limited be awarded the contract for the completion of the City of Revelstoke Transportation Master Plan in the amount of $123,000 and $123,311.13 plus GST.
Nice round number. Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was excited to see this on our agenda. I was looking forward to reading through it. Looks like quite a robust plan that I'm excited to see come through. I have a couple of questions. One is just simply about timing. It looks like we'll be starting about a month later than the original proposal. So I'm assuming they will finish a month later as well. Or where does that ending of this, when is that final report planning to come out?
Mr. Black.
Through your worship, Councillor Gillette, as soon as we can execute this contract, we will enter into negotiations with the consultant to see if we can develop a recovery plan to still meet our goal of the end of September this year. That, of course, is subject to a lot of work that needs to be put in place in a shorter time frame. So as much as I would like to say that we will still be able to meet that goal, I put that out there cautiously that we will make every effort to achieve it.
All right, fair enough. And through your worship, I see a lot of language in there around stakeholder engagement, making sure that we're listening to all the voices, including marginalized groups and issues with accessibility, which I think is critical for a transportation plan for obvious reasons. I'm wondering, I don't hear it mentioned by name. I'm wondering if there is a role, or if we could describe the role that you see collective impact potentially playing in this.
Mr. Black.
Through your worship, we will engage I don't know if you had a chance to review the RFP itself, but it is a very robust communication program, and we will be reaching out to everybody that we can as part of the program. That includes a technical steering committee, council, senior management, the OCP focus group, the Ministry of Transportation, CP Rail, BC Transit, business community, active transportation groups, seniors and citizen groups, schools and tertiary education representatives, tourist and resort industry representatives, and the general public. So I'm hopeful that that list of stakeholders is comprehensive to satisfy council's need to have a robust engagement strategy.
Right, and I think Your Worship, where I was going with it was it sounds very overlapping with that collective impact process and the groups that we have in place with the listening team and with the work they've been doing with the OCP process so thus far and helping with that listening part. I'm just hoping there's some synergies that can be found there. I know there's a lot of really keen people interested in transportation in our community. I think some innovative ideas will come from there, but I will take a closer look at the RFP. Thank you. And one final question, if I could, Your Honor.
Yes.
I noticed that there was a software system mentioned in the proposal that was not Bang the Table. And I'm just wondering how that fits. Is it going to be a separate process from Bang the Table? Is there some integration to Bang the Table? Will the citizen notice any difference?
Through your Worship, Councillor Schlett, there will be an integration. And again, once we kick off the project, then we will be able to utilize perhaps both. But Bang the Table as our new platform for engaging the community will be the lead. And if we fall under a separate program that the consultant has chosen to pursue in order to achieve the goals that they've used and projects they have completed previously, we will do everything that we can to get out the word. And like I said, Bang the Table will be the lead public engagement strategy on the city webpage.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much. I have one more question, but I'm happy to let somebody else go too.
Councillor Rind, and then we'll come back.
Thanks. So this looks pretty great. I'm excited about it. But since it's a plan, is it going to have concrete outcomes as well? Like, just as an example, I don't know, there's probably several, but downtown parking, like once this transportation plan is done, is the city going to have like a playbook for how to deal with those funds that developers pay into for parking in lieu, for example? Or is this just setting us up to put those in place? Is it a plan to plan?
Mr. Black.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Rind, as I don't know if you've had a chance to review the proposal itself, the RFP itself, but we will be coming back to council under the parking example with best practices that are utilized throughout resort communities similar to Revelstoke. TDM, the carrot and the stick, if you will, to encourage people not to drive and park downtown or utilize carpooling techniques. So, and then establish and improve our existing parking bylaws and enforcement practices. And then we'll also be able to understand what sort of shortage or excess in parking we have downtown. I think you're alluding that perhaps that we have a shortage of parking downtown, and depending on how active transportation and mode shift happens with bicycle, buses, and those things, we may not have the need to build a parking structure sometime in the future. Should we have a robust plan that leads us in a way that reduces vehicle traffic in a single occupant vehicle or automobile? I'm sorry.
Is that going to come out of this report?
Yes, these are things that are going to come out of the report, and so we'll be looking at all aspects of transportation, not just cars, buses, goods movement, but also people moving around town, pedestrian networks, bicycle networks, and the parking demand, transit improvements, and
Okay, but so just to clarify, so the plan itself, would it just outline like these are the best practices given the current situation that your community faces and the policies that guide parking right now, but we suggest you do this, and then it would create a separate conversation separate from the transportation plan where staff would come to council and say, you know, based on our transportation plan, we think we should change our policies this way. What do you think about that? Is that what the transportation master plan does?
Through your worship, yes. Yes, there will be more effort that needs to be put in place to put the bylaws and regulations in place to complete most of these things. This is a high-level study.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then my second and last question is, what are the projects that are being held up or waiting on this transportation master plan to be complete?
Mr. Black.
Through your worship, currently I cannot envision any projects that are being delayed by this not being complete, except as Director Wade outlined earlier, the master plan for the DCCs and the OCP. So we would anticipate that the other outcomes of this would be, where do we need more roads? Where do we not need more roads? Where do we need bike paths? And how do we pay for all of those things, not only in the next 20 years, but in build out, so that we can ensure that we're capturing all the costs that future development is bringing to the community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm excited to have the plan to get rolling on this. There's a few things that I get concerned on, terms like best practices. Is this best practices of this year? In 5 years, the best practices will be dramatically different. I was encouraged when you used, the Director of Engineering used the words like mode shift, and I really hope there is an emphasis on what our future looks like in respect of transportation. I'm hopeful that when we talk about things about transit, that they actively look at rethinking on how we do those kind of things. Now, that might not be integrated in detail, but we really need to rethink things about the empty buses running around every day, and also the excess of the asphalt in the current modes of what would be today's best practices of excessively large streets and excessively large amounts of asphalt, in moving to more active transportation where you have separation of people and bicycles and such, clear separation from the vehicle areas. And again, thank you for bringing up the about parking. As we move into the future, it's certainly the automotive industry knows that things are changing, and there will be a time when there's in the not too distant future where there's a lot less private ownerships, because it doesn't make sense for people to have cars that are parked for 23 and a half hours a day and then either downtown just occupying space. So I'm looking forward to those changes in society, and I really do encourage that these what we look like in the future will be actively pursued by Stantec. I'm always a little bit concerned about the big engineering companies because they tend to be traditionally focused. I hope there's some, when you went through the categories of however you did the assessment, that there is younger people that have a better sense of where we're going as a society. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Palmer. Any final comments, Mr. Black?
Through Your Worship, thank you, Councillor Palmer. We are very keen on achieving the same goals that I think most of Council is looking forward to in the future. Flying cars, EVs, all of those things are coming forward, and we do need to prepare our community for them. Now, whether flying cars occur in our lifetimes, we will see. But we have been through this on other locations, and we are very keen on seeing your goals realized in this master plan, and community engagement will be very exciting to see where we end up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Black. Councillor Charlotte.
Thanks, Your Worship. I've got just a follow-up question around Indigenous engagement. There's one page in the proposal from Stantec that the whole proposal is fantastic, and I think there is quite a bit of mention towards those future and that innovative ideas. It's going to be fun to watch. But in their timeline, there is quite a bit of work devoted to Indigenous engagement. And I'm just wondering if Mr. Black could maybe speak to that a little bit, of how he envisions that, or if that's still to be discussed with the proponent.
Mr. Black?
Through your worship, Councillor Gillette, we will be engaging with I believe there's 7 nations that have interest in this area, either through our economic development folks or directly through contacts with Stantec. So we will be developing that program as we move forward, and unfortunately I cannot provide more information to you at this time.
Okay. And I was just asking your worship because I know we have been doing quite a bit of work to build those relationships with our neighbors, and I would just hope that any conversations would come through our Director of Economic Development, because Ms. Braun has been lead or staff lead on most of those conversations. So I think there's some opportunity there to potentially build out and build on those relationships. But I was just curious to hear. Thank you.
Great, and that's the key. It's when we're talking about the Indigenous groups, it's the relationships, and so we're building those relationships both with Ms. Braun and her office and this office here. So it's great to see, and Councillor Charlette's sitting with the Tunaha and other groups as well. So we appreciate that. Councillor Elliott, you have a question or a comment?
No, thank you, Your Worship. Stephen, it's great that you've outlined all the priorities or the aspects you'll be looking in this transportation plan. I think we have a clean slate. There's a lot of willingness to innovate and accept new ideas on all the council, or maybe the community as a whole. We're looking for a new path here. One of the things I don't see is efficiency in design. And to me, that's if you have the design right, the efficiency sort of follows, and all those things sort of play into it. So I look forward to, I hope efficiency is on your list of top priorities to address.
Through your worship, Councillor Elliott, part of the program will to be also looking at the hierarchy of roads.
Yeah.
And do we need pavement?
Yes, great.
And I know that is an area that is near and dear to your heart. And,
yes.
And from a maintenance perspective, anytime we have extra asphalt, that means we have extra snow plowing, and that means we have extra road to maintain. And so minimizing or maximizing the road section, depending on your perspective, is certainly a goal, because we do want to maximize our dollars to the taxpayers and minimize costs in the future for maintaining those road assets.
That's great.
Good.
Well, I look forward to it, Stephen. Thank you.
Any further comments, councillors? Seeing none, I will ask the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion's carried unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Black. Appreciate your time and your efforts in getting this complete.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
All right, we're going to move on to 10E, Property Tax Distribution Report. Someone want to put the first motion on the table, and we'll have a discussion on that, please. Councillor Brooks-Hill.
That the current financial plan objectives and policies related to taxation/revenue and permissive tax exemptions be approved for use in the 2021 to 2025 financial plan bylaw.
Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Gillette. Discussion on the motion. Ms. McCabe, are you still with us? Yes, you are.
I am here, Your Worship.
Looking all around at the bottom, and I knew you were there. Any comments on this before, or do you want us to just ask you questions?
I think asking questions is fine. This is the same as what was done last year, so the policy is the same. It's not changed.
Councillors, any questions for Ms. McCabe regarding the permissive tax exemptions? Councillor Gillette.
Thank you, Your Worship. Reading through the report here, I'm curious. I didn't see a report, and maybe I missed it somewhere, about the current value in each assessment class, like the value of the properties and the shift in that value in properties. And the reason why I ask is I know we've been talking a lot about the development and the growth in the community, but then there's some places where it's stalled. And I think this was probably discussed in the financial committee looking at that. But just to see, making sure that that 50-50 split is still appropriate.
Ms. McCabe.
The assessment values are not actually finalized until the end of March. But there has been some non-market change this year. It's just whether or not it's going to stay through the appeal process. There is the usual increase in residential, where the residential base has gone up approximately 10% in value, whereas the business class has not gone up as much. I believe the increase was about 4.5%, maybe 5% over the previous year. So we are seeing that what we've seen in the past, where values for residential properties are continuing to grow at a faster rate than the other assessment classes. However, that doesn't impact it doesn't mean we collect more money from the residential class, because of course the tax rate is set by allocating their share of the pie and then figuring out the tax rate by working backwards. So
right.
Yes, and so the projection at this point, based on the current assessment values, is that the residential class will be 51% of the total tax base, which is consistent with policy, which states that it should be 50% or more.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or concerns, councillors? Seeing none, I will ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Please note that Councillor Palmer is opposed and the rest of council is in favor. Motion is carried. Moving on to item 10E2. Councillor Palmer, you have a question.
Your Worship, I had my hand up before you called for opposed, so I was in favor of that motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't see your hand up until after.
Okay.
Thank you. So then it is unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Please note that, Ms. Russo, that all council was in favor. Thank you. Moving on to item E2, if someone want to put that motion on the table. Councillor Brooks-Hill?
Yeah, I can carry on. The tax distribution among the different property taxes for 2021 remained consistent with the prior year by applying the same tax increase to all properties, resulting in a distribution to residential properties that is at least 50% of the total property tax revenue in accordance with policy F9.
Okay, seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott. And this is just what we had discussed a moment ago about being at 50% or higher. Any further comments, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will vote in favor, but I do have a comment regarding policy F9 and just a few quotes from it. So some of the principles in there is that we increase at a regular basis in line with inflation, and this is not necessarily doing that. A proportion of the revenue generated by property taxation will be kept to a minimum. I think there's some questions on that. Residential taxpayers are the predominant users of the city services, and therefore should bear a larger portion of the tax burden. It is in that policy. I question that statement. And finally, the council recognizes the need to have a fair distribution of tax burden to enable both business sector to succeed while maintaining the city as an affordable place to live. And we note that we are becoming very unaffordable, both for businesses and residents. And I think that we need to be looking at this policy. And I'm making reference in here, if it's acceptable to council, I would like to, after this is passed, make a resolution that's the council review policy F9 within the next meeting or two. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments on the motion that's on the table? All those in favor? Motion's carried, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Palmer. You wanted to make a motion.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So make a motion that policy F9 be reviewed by council. Your Worship, I'd like to make it time bound, but I want to make sure that we're reasonable. I don't know if this could be something that's added on to the committee of the whole this time, or we could have it for next council meeting.
It's not, it's too late for committee of the whole, but we could address it at the next council meeting.
Okay, so that council reviews.
So before we go forward, Mr. Palmer, I'll ask Ms. Lowe to confirm that so that I'm not giving you erroneous information. Ms. Lowe, you're muted.
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. McCabe, was this policy not reviewed by council this year?
It was reviewed by the Finance Committee in the summertime, last summer.
Okay, so bringing this forward for review, what does that look like for you?
Time-wise, I would prefer that it be done this year, but in the fall so that I can get through the budget and the year end while I'm short-staffed. However, I recognize that Councillor Palmer would like to get this done. So I understand that. Its next meeting would be, I mean, the deadline was yesterday, or today.
Yeah, Councillor Palmer, would it be all right with you if we brought it forward at a later date in a couple of months?
Your Worship, I would be fine with that. Now, I pulled this off. If it's been reviewed recently, I don't know if it was amended or just reviewed. So I've just pulled this off the site. I'll take a look at that. So in a couple months, but I would like to have it done so that it's in time before getting into the whole next budget cycle.
Good idea.
And so let's say on or before the end of, or on or before June 15th.
That work with you, Ms. McCabe?
I'm sure I can certainly work towards it, and if there's challenges with that, then I'll bring them forward to council at that time.
Okay.
So we'll look at, sorry, Your Worship, we'll look at June the 10th Committee of the Whole meeting for a discussion paper for a review of council. Okay. Thank you.
So Councillor Palmer is putting that motion forward. I still need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Elliott has put his hand up first, so we'll go with him. Any further discussion on the motion? I know Councillor Charlotte, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This speaks to one of the conversations we've been having since we were first elected as council, and it pertaining to financing of municipalities. I know there's been a lot of conversation at UBCM about how our tools are limited and how this is really frustrating for municipalities to try and fund our services, but make it affordable for our citizens and make sure that that burden is distributed equitably. I'm wondering if, as part of this report back on F9, is that we could look at any lessons that have been learned over the last year or two with the pandemic and where the current conversation is with the new NDP government, the majority government. Maybe there's some conversation there, especially with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs being a former mayor. So hopefully there's some movement on this conversation rather than just a frustrating discussion about how we have limited tools.
Good point. Good point. Thank you for that. Okay. Any further discussion on the motion that Councillor Palmer has just put forward? All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. We're going to move on now into in-camera pursuant to sections 90.1G of the Community Charter. Before I do that, questions from the press. So, Ms. Floyd, any questions from the press?
I have not received any, no.
All right, good. So let's move on to in-camera pursuant to section 90.1G of the Community Charter. Someone want to make that motion for me, please? Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Brooks Hill. All in favor? Motion's carried. We're going to take a 3-minute break before we go in